Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. My name is Matthew Clementi. I'm the Director of Research and Curriculum at the Center for Psychological Humanities and Ethics here at Boston College, which is bringing you this event through our Psychological Humanities lecture series. It's an incredible pleasure to be here and to welcome you here tonight. Great turnout. Most of you my students, so thank you for showing up. I did put it as an assignment, so that's why a lot of you are here, but I still appreciate you turning out for that. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to welcome you here tonight for a talk by a dear friend, D. Graham Burnett, on a topic that I think is both timely and essential for us to be thinking about, which is the topic of attention and how our attention in many ways in the technological landscape that we live in is being, to use Graham's terminology, fracked. And so Graham will kind of take us through that. Before we do, I asked Graham on the walk over here, should I read his bio from our program? And he said, reading bios is always terrible, which I completely agreed with. And so I'll just give you like a very brief story that I think captures Graham a little bit. The first time I met him, it was on Zoom. So, technology is both a help and a harm in many ways. I reached out to him because I came across some very, very fascinating work that he's doing as a part of an art collective. And at the time, as a philosopher, I was thinking about the ways that life and fiction play off of one another and blend together and work together. And I came upon Graham and the work of this art collective, and it so captured my attention. I was fascinated by it, and I had to meet one of the people behind it. So I reached out to him, and he very generously said, do you want to set up a time to meet and talk? And so I said, sure. So we met on Zoom, and I thought to myself, this could go one of two ways. Either we'll have a nice conversation and maybe do something afterwards, or it will be a complete flop and nothing will come of it. So Graham logs onto the Zoom. All of a sudden, I'm in his kitchen, and he says, do you mind if I make myself a chicken sandwich while we talk? And so he's in the kitchen cooking, and this is like noon on a weekday. He pops open a beer, and we're just talking. And what I thought would be like a 15 to 20 minute conversation turned into probably an hour and a half, ranging conversation, not only intellectually stimulating, but really personally edifying. I mean, I felt like I was welcomed into his home and into his kitchen during this conversation. And we kind of became immediate friends, which I think speaks to the type of person Graham is beyond the type of intellectual. Now, I will say something about him as a thinker. Anyone who knows me well, my students can probably attest to this, know that I'm very unimpressed with most thinkers, if I'm being honest. I think as a philosopher, you're kind of trained to be, because you're reading Plato, or you're reading Hegel, or you're reading Spinoza, and then you come across other thinkers, and naturally you're like, yeah, okay, I see what you're doing. You know Plato, but you're pretty good, Graham is one of the few contemporary thinkers whose works I've come across that I've stepped back and said, there's genius in this work. There's something essential being done in this work. And I would not say that if I didn't mean it. That's not a compliment I would give lightly. So it's an incredible pleasure for me to welcome you here tonight to hear an important thinker and a very good friend of mine. I'll just read, because he did request that I give his title from the university. D. Graham Burnett is the Henry Charles Lee Professor of History and History of Science at Princeton University. He's a true friend, and he's someone worth listening to. Graham.
That test. Even more yes, pretty much. I might even give us a little bit more sound here. Matthew, Professor Clemente. Hello, Professor Clemente. Testing, yes. Oh, I like, even louder. How about that? Yes? Good. I so appreciate that incredibly generous introduction. And it's possible because neither you nor I nor AV has a clicker that I may go old school and ask Professor Clemente to go right up there to the mic. And so when I say things like, could you go to the next slide, please? You can advance for me, okay? Let's do that. I'll get you up there. And part of the reason for that is that I like the feng shui here. It's good, it's working for me, but a lot of you are like pretty far away from me, if I'm being honest. And I can have a bit of a feeling like I'm almost at the bottom of a well with respect to the shape of the room. And so I wanna, I can see your students stressing out now, Matthew. Walk back there at different moments in order to be close to you as I talk to you. So that could happen. I also see some people in the room who were at my lunch conversation in the formative education whatnot. And I actually actively asked them not to come because I'm talking about so much of the same stuff that I was very concerned that they would be extremely bored and that they would realize I only have like one thing to say. So I said, thank you, don't come. But they're here, and that makes me feel like I have to throw out my whole talk and try to do something different so that I don't fail them. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm gonna do something that's different from what I was gonna do. I think we should start with a little attentional exercise, team, if that's not too weird. So this will only take like 2 or 3 minutes, and it'll be like an activation of the thing I'm here to talk about. My title is ATTENSITY, Human Attention, Solidarity, and Radical World Remaking, which is very ambitious. By the end of this talk, I'll be just like low-key shilling. I'll be like on the make, being like, this is the community I work with. We're trying to get a movement going. Will you help us out? We believe in this. It's nonprofit, wacka, wacka, wacka. I'm going to do that, but by the time we finish, you'll get a little bit of that from me. And so that's like the solidarity and radical world remaking part. But I'm, as Matthew said, a historian of science. And so I work on the history of the human sciences. How many people in this room are psychology or psychology adjacent? Studying psychology, interested in psychology? Okay. So, you know, psychology is a human science. It's a science of human persons. And I do the history of that science. And as I'll discuss in a minute, I've been working on a history of the laboratory study of human attention. So is there anybody here who's like kind of a little worried about their attention and how it's working? And like, are there any like people who have any modest concerns about their attention? That's okay, you can get those hands up, but you can be brave. I want to talk to the people who didn't raise their hands there because you obviously have some superpowers from which the rest of us need to learn. And maybe even we'll discuss possibility of blood transfusions or something where you can help the rest of us out. Broadly speaking, there are some ways in which these devices have been part of a kind of series of shifts over the last 10 or 15 years in the way we experience our attention. And the work that I'll talk about in a moment examines the laboratory research that sliced and diced human attention en route to pricing human attention in the marketplace. Because these devices run on a business model that is sometimes called the attention economy, right? You have a sense of how that works? You're in the flow of a scroll, and what you're being fed are materials that have been selected algorithmically to maximize your time on device. TOD. Who knows German? Here, what is TOD? is the German word for louder. Death. That's right. TOD is the German word for death. It's probably just coincidence. But it is also the abbreviation for time on device, which is what the human frackers are always trying to maximize. And why do they want to maximize this? You guys all know this. Everyone knows this already. Because your eyeballs can be auctioned to the highest bidder in a continuous, instantaneous market to trade in human attention. And as we were discussing at lunch, the scale of this market is enormous. That's like, you're ready for that feedback, right? Let's see, where do sorry. Scale of that market is about $17 trillion now, which is half of the US GDP. And as we were saying, that's a market that at present encompasses 6 of the 6 largest corporations by market valuation on the US stock exchange. And we could probably name them. NVIDIA, who makes the chips for the algorithmic AI-driven calculations that optimize your content feeds. Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, and I'm missing somebody. Yeah, but that's Alphabet, actually. Did I say Alphabet? Yeah. Right, Meta. There we go. Thank you. So there they are, 6 of the 6 largest corporations. They all have their vampiric suckers in your face and are making cash money out of your interest, your care, what moves you. And I think we would sort of begin to notice that this is in some ways like meaningfully changed the experience of personhood and meaningfully changed the experience of our relations to each other over the last 15 years. So the work I'm going to discuss right now is partially a little historical diagnosis of how we got to that point, how that happened. But yesterday evening, a friend of mine said, actually, no one cares about history, Graham. Which was kind of devastating, actually, because I've been at this for a long time now, so I kind of took that on the nose. He was like, don't tell people about how we got here. It's not interesting. They want to know how to fix it. Just talk with them about how to fix it, how to make it better. And so I am going to try to talk about that. I'm going to try to say, look, we recognize that something weird is going on, that the 6 largest corporations in the world are commodifying the indices of human consciousness, care, interest, our mind, time, and senses. We realize there's something kind of messed up about that. What are we supposed to do? You're going to do a little transcendental meditation, maybe, helps a little bit. Get a screen time monitor app, helps a little bit, maybe. But in practice, you could also medicate. How many people in here are medicated? Just kidding. Don't answer that. That was only kind of funny. A lot of us are medicated, for attention, because in part, they're messing with our attention, for real. So, but there is still something I think we can do about it, and I'm going to speak to that. By the end, I'm going to say that the only thing we can do is come together in a movement to push back against this heedless, greedy, and at present largely unregulated system of human exploitation. So I'll invoke a couple of moments where people have come together and been like, oh wait, no, you can't do this to us. You're harming us. Environmental movement in the 60s, where people came together and like, you can't just completely despoil the external environment. And in important ways, as we were discussing at lunch, the labor movement in the wake of the Industrial Revolution, in which another new technology made possible new forms of exploitation, And at a certain point, people had to come together and invent a whole new kind of politics, in a sense. Labor politics, trade unionism, to defend themselves. And we are again at that inflection point. And that's what I'm going to suggest we're going to see over the next 10 years. We're already beginning to see it. We know we're being harmed. We know a meaningful percentage of our kids are. I was just on Monday of last week at a UNDP conference with all 6 of the living US Surgeons General on the stage. Gold stuff on their epaulets and everything. And what was the discussion? It was literally a discussion of the global crisis in youth mental health. Just slide after slide about, not just in the US, but beyond, and a pandemic of emotional and psychological anguish among young people, and isolation, and these profound feelings of being severed, anxiety, depression. And Jonathan Haidt also spoke at that conference. Who's read a little Jonathan Haidt here? The Anxious Generation. So Haidt spoke right before I did, and he made a really compelling case, a causal argument, that the problem is these devices. And I'm going to do a quickie on this, and I promised you an attention exercise, and we're going to get it. I'm going to get there. One sec. Just want to kind of do a little resume of the argument here up front. Jonathan Haidt makes an argument that the phones are the problem. He can show that that incredible increase in youth mental health problems doesn't just temporally correlate, but he's pretty sharp on making the causal argument. He's a quantitative social scientist. There are people who argue with him. Those of you who are interested in that debate, you can kind of look it up. There's a ton of heavily footnoted scholarship on this. But he makes a very powerful claim that it's a causal argument. Although, do you feel the irony? How can there be a global epidemic of people feeling profoundly isolated and the cause be a networked system of communication that ensures that no person is even for a tenth of a second out of contact with the entire rest of the known human cosmos and everything that humans have ever generated? Do you feel the kind of weird paradox of that? We all feel like, lots and lots of people struggle with depression and anxiety correlated to a sense of isolation, and the cause is the most extensive network communication system in the history of the planet? That's kind of odd. And I think I'm here to help us all feel the resolution of that problem. We're going to kind of square the circle here on that paradox. Because the problem is not the phones. And the problem is not social media. If the phones had been invented by your mother so that you would be in touch with her regularly, they would not be kind of precipitating this strange situation. And if social media had been designed by 3 Buddhist monks and a set of really imaginative artists so that we could more generally share the things we wanted to say with each other and achieve human connectivity, we wouldn't be experiencing this. The problem is the business model, what we call human fracking, this idea that you have to maximize time on device and ensure that people are like this for between 6 and 8 hours a day. 75% of the population of the planet at this point has these things and is like that all the time. And that turns out to be deeply at odds with something profound about our embodied personhoods and our needs for each other. So I want to say that again. Don't let anybody tell you it's the phone. If people are like, the problem's phones, be like, it's actually not phones. If people are like, yeah, social media, it's really doing us a lot of damage, be like, it's not social media. Be very clear. It is a heedless, greedy, exploitative, extractive enterprise that is currently commodifying the core elements of human consciousness at unprecedented scale, and it's a biohack at population dimension, which is really weird to be the guinea pigs in an unprecedented experiment of biohacking humanity. So if you wonder why our politics can feel a little weirdly like testy and divisive, or why we're kind of medicating like a quarter of meaningful demographics of our population for psychological and emotional disorders, if you're wondering about like what's going on there, it's not the phones, it's not social media. It's a very specific business plan, which it is possible that we could resist, but it's going to take a lot of work, because it's not like they're going to voluntarily regulate themselves. Hey, team, is that going to happen? No, they're not going to do that. And do you think that your local congressman is suddenly going to get interested in bringing to heel the 6 largest corporations on the planet? I don't mean to sound like a cynic, but I don't think that's very likely, right? I mean, that poor guy has to come up with like $6 million for his campaign, and he'd hardly think it was a good idea to alienate the most deep-pocketed institutions on the planet. So we're going to have a small number of folks who fight that fight. So big pharma, are they going to help us? Only sort of. You know, they'll happily medicate us for the kind of attentional trauma of living in this condition, but they're just as interested in banking the bottom line as anyone else. So we're going to need to figure this out ourselves, and I'm here to talk with you about the need for an actual movement in which we come together in solidarity and begin to talk about the need to protect and guard our attention in new ways. Collectively, what we need are our friends. That's what I'm here to say. What we need is not a screen time monitoring app. We need to have friends and do with them the things we love to do that bring us closer to them and to the world. And we need to do that while saying, hey, this is really important. This is about our preserving our humanity in the face of a totally destructive industry that is indifferent to our humanity and that would liquidate humanity. We said this at lunch. That would literally liquidate humanity if there were no liability issues in order to maximize their return to investors, if there were any left. Can I say that again? Are there any business majors in the room who want to check the math with me on that? Right. So corporations have an obligation to maximize their return to shareholders. They have to be very careful not to get into like liability issues. But if there were no liability issues and you could sort of immolate humanity and maximize return on investment, you'd have like a legal obligation vis-a-vis your shareholders to do that. I mean, that's why corporations are sort of, their legal personhood is arguably psychotic. Like the legal personhood of a corporation is that of a sociopath. So they're not likely to help us. Upshot, we're going to have to do this ourselves, team, and it's going to be interesting to see if we can pull it off. Okay, let's do something weird. I'm going to ask you all to sit for a second. Just kind of like you're already sitting, aren't you? Okay, let's sit. Get comfortable for a moment. This is an attentional experiment where you're going to get to feel out something about your attention. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to, I'll tell you what we're going to do, and then we'll actually do it. We're going to take a couple of deep breaths, close our eyes. There's nothing weird. You're not going to get dizzy. You're not going to collapse. You're not going to fall over. Don't do this if you don't want to, all those kinds of things. This is very simple. We're going to close our eyes, raise our heads a little bit, and then in a few moments, we'll open our eyes briefly. I'll talk to you for a second. We'll close them again, and then we'll talk about what happened. So just bear with me and kind of like work with me. Here we go. I'm going to ring a bell to get us started, and then I'll ring a bell when we are finished. Okay? Here we go. So could you close your eyes for me? And we'll take a couple of deep breaths. And one more in and out. So if you're comfortable with it, just lift your chin a little bit, like maybe 15 degrees, so that if your eyes were open, you would find a spot kind of at the edge of the ceiling or something like that. Not too high, not too low, but kind of a little bit up. And I'm going to ask you now in a moment to open your eyes and notice something on your eye line. So it's going to be something up around the edge of the roof. It can be anything. It could be a tile in the roof or a little fire spigot or something you see that's a little above the room, not too high. So when I ring the bell again, let's open our eyes, find something on which to fixate up there, and we'll just keep looking at that. We'll look at that for a few moments. Keep looking at it until we talk. Okay, so here we go on the bell, finding an object on which to fix our gaze. So just stay with whatever it is that you've decided to look at. And in a moment or two, I'm going to ask you to notice something moving in your peripheral vision. So keep looking. Don't look at that thing. Keep looking at what you're fixating on. Never take your gaze away from whatever you're fixating on. But just keep looking until you see some movement in the periphery. Notice something. And in a moment, I'm going to ring the bell. We'll close our eyes again, and we'll actually be done. Another moment. Still looking in the same place, and we'll close our eyes on the bell. Deep breath, roll out the neck, and whenever you're ready, just kind of open your eyes, and we are done. So what we just did actually reproduces the earliest experiments that identified human attention as a psychological phenomenon. What we just did was we sort of divided our sensory focus from our awareness. At that moment where you sort of noticed somebody's arm move or the tablecloth slightly blowing, you were looking up here, you never looked away, but some aspect of your consciousness, your mind, was over there. What does it mean for your mind to be over there while your eye is here? That split, that sort of degree split in the 1850s in the work of this guy, Hermann von Helmholtz, opened way to a century and a half of research on human attention. The idea that somehow human awareness or consciousness was present in the sensory manifold and not homologous with the sensory focus. So sensory focus and awareness could be pried apart, which meant that we were in our sensory field somewhere. And that you-ness in the sensory field was like a new mystery for psychology. You can do it in sound, too. It's pretty cool. I don't know if there are people, who's a musician? We got any musicians in the room? Oh, Oh, that's good. I like to see that. Like back in when Helmholtz, the German guy in the 1850s, was doing this, everybody in his set in Germany had spent their whole lives playing chamber music. So he could say to people, if you want to do this with sound, I'd like you to listen to a Brahms piece, and I would like you to just focus on the melodic line and become aware of the overtones in the dominant chord. Most of us would not be able to do that now. Maybe a few of the musicians could. But in 1855, basically everyone in Germany of a certain level of university education could do that too. But it's the exact same thing. Keep your attention on the melodic line, become aware of the overtone. Interesting. What does that mean that you're there with the overtone, even though that's not what you're looking at? I'm going to now, with Matt's help, run through some slides to talk a little bit about what happens to that research tradition. And this will go quick because I want to hear from you on some of the stuff we're talking about. But let me run some slides. So go ahead, quick. Yes, slide, that's I. Another one. That's my little disclosure saying nobody paid me to deliver this message to you, and I'm not being funded by a pharmaceutical company or anything like that. Next. 3 things I'm doing. Go ahead. Ding. A little history of science. Next. Human fracking. I've already mentioned this, but I'm going to talk about this more. Next. And then attention activism, which is the thing I'm going to be encouraging y'all we need to think about. This is the solidarity and world-remaking. Next. This is the history of science part. Real quick. Boom. And I've talked about this stuff before, so there's some people who may have heard me talk about this. You came to a talk, I did. There's some stuff online. Doesn't matter. This is the actual history of science book I'm finishing up. I'm going to blast through this like incredibly fast. If you want more, buttonhole me later. Go. Next. These are chapters. Attention wave. This is in the 1890s to the 1920s when people believed that human attention had a natural periodicity, that it was like a heartbeat, that all people had a kind of oscillatory attention quality. And there were fabulous experimental arguments that proved that this was the case. And the coolest thing people claimed was that maybe the fact that all human languages have sentence structure. Where's that linguistic anthropologist who was at lunch? He probably took my advice and didn't come. Good for him. Well, it's weird that all human languages have sentences. Computers don't need that, and they think fine. So you don't have to have sentence structure. Why do we all have sentence structure? And this is a juicy argument in linguistics, but people in that period were like, oh, wow, maybe it's because physiologically we have an oscillatory attentional rhythm, and sentence structure itself in all human languages reflects that biological rhythm of our attentionality. Let's keep going. This is next slide. This is in fact not next slide. Yeah, that's an example of what it looked like. There were smaller and larger waves in the attentionality. This turns out not to be right, but it was just proof that scientists can come up with amazing ideas. Next section, next. We're going to blast through these. Go. Chapter on the way that early advertisers got interested in eye tracking. Who here has worked with an eye tracker? A couple of the experimental psychology people following where human eyes go. Next slide. This is an early one. No computers, no lasers. This is like raw dogging eye tracking in like a steampunk idiom. Next slide. These things let you reconstruct where the foveation of a human gaze went in a visual field. Who was paying for all of this research in the 1930s? Next slide. Look magazine, actually, which was like the Life magazine of the era, which wanted to be able to quantify the value of advertisements at different locations and at different sizes in magazines. So this is like a beta build of the attention economy in the 1930s. This is actually an ad that ran in the newspaper in the 1930s. It's kind of funny. Has anyone seen this before? It's an amazing thing. Literally, that traces the gaze of 100 women looking at that dude and summarizes the amount of time that they eye-fornicated his different regions. And it's basically an advertisement for hats. Because it turns out, apparently, in like 1942, all women ogled men's haberdashery and were really focused on the hat experience. Bit on the tie, a little on the pocket square. So anyway, this is like using human summarized, quantified attention to sell us stuff, which is what is still happening, only at a much more refined and industrial scale operation. Next. Real quick, cybernetic attention looks at the military. Next. We can just fly through a few of these. This is kind of cool. This is like the earliest video games like known to man. That guy is trying out to be a pilot in the US Air Force in like 1924. And what they would do is put him in front of like a little cursor that would go left and right in front of him. It was on a worm screw, and it would go back and forth. And he had to manipulate a little mechanical envelope to keep the cursor in the envelope. It's like very primitive Space Invaders, maximally primitive, but cool because he's on a rebreather. Who knows what a rebreather is? That's where you're gradually deoxygenated. Do you guys get like what happens? Yeah, you eventually lose consciousness. So what you're doing is playing a video game as you're asphyxiated, and you get to be a pilot if you can successfully play low-grade Space Invaders the longest as your friends are falling on the floor left and right. So that's, and here's an even more fancy version where you also had to do something with your feet while you did something with your hands. Next. A lot of this work goes into the early flight simulating systems that the Air Force used for training pilots. Next. The other thing that was really important to attention scientists in this period was radar monitoring. This is an early radar screen. Next. These were the tests that were developed to, this was called the Mackworth clock. You can still find little widgets experimentally that will let you do this. It's like a clock with a sweep second hand, and periodically at a random moment, the second hand skips 2 seconds, and you just see if people notice that. Next. This led to a bunch of papers on human vigilance, capacity of people to notice things for long periods of time. What I want you to notice here is that the US military is paying for vast amounts of scientific research to determine how to keep people staying on a screen for the longest period of time humanly possible. That's what this initially classified research is. It's how long can you get people to stare at screens? And sometimes you give them some amphetamines, which it turns out helps. Next slide, human vigilance. Next, Cold War communication. Next. This is about another round of work done on attention that involved feeding people different information in their different ears. Next, leads to Broadbent's theory of the filter system in attention. Next, and I'll skip through this next stuff. Last chapter of the book, just keep bouncing through these, Matt, are about the period where people get interested in other forms of attention, like meditation and silent vigils as forms of political protest. This is like the counterculture pushback against that mechanomorphic, cybernetic attentional tradition. Next. So, as we discussed at lunch, we all worry about our attention now. A lot of us do. We worry about our attention spans. Part of what I've just tried to show you is that there's an experimental research tradition in psychology that defines attention in a relatively narrow track and trigger stimulus response way that can be quantified. So in essence, this tradition we've just been talking about slices and dices this very particular form of attention en route to being priced in the marketplace. Is that tracking and triggering capacity human attention? I mean, it's got something to do with human attention, sure. But is it like the fullness of what it is to be an attentional being? Definitely not. Like, taking care of your child is attentional. It does not look like the video game where the guy's moving back and forth. It's totally different than that, right, everybody? All those other kinds of attention that are things that are very important to being a human did not get studied in laboratories because the Department of Defense was not that interested in those things, if you follow me, right? So part of the punchline of the story I'm telling you is that, again, if you'd given the entire budget of the US Defense Department to 4 Buddhist monks in 1940, you would have a totally different science of human attention by this point, okay? And I don't mean by that you'd have like a woo science of attention. I just mean those guys would have asked some different questions and they would have produced a lot of peer-reviewed scientific literature on other aspects of human attentional capacities. But we ended up with this. Next, human fracking. And as I said at lunch, human fracking is about doing the exact thing that petroleum fracking is. Fracking? Who's heard of fracking? Yeah, right, you know what fracking is. Fracking is like where you get oil out of the ground, not by just poking a hole and having it squirt up, which never happens now. There's none of that left. There are no like zits of oil like right under the surface that you can just kind of be like, hey, a gusher. Doesn't happen. So how do you get the oil that's left? It doesn't just squirt up. You have to pump down into the surface of the earth high pressure, high volume detergent in order to crack up the foundational layers tectonically and drive back up to the surface this nasty slurry of a mixture of hydrocarbons and the detritus from the fracking fluids. This is, as we were discussing at lunch, bad for the earth, tectonic destabilization, earthquakes, pollution. It's also like a perfect description of how the business model of these things work. Because it's not like you think you kind of like want to do this, that, or the other thing on the device, but of course, in fact, what's going on is that continuously these systems are set up to pump into your face high pressure, high volume detergent to crack up the structural foundations of your psyche, to disaggregate your attentional capacities, and to drive to the surface a monetizable spume of your attention, which, as we said, is being continuously auctioned. Next slide. And click. This only gets worse when you start getting into AI, because these systems, as we were saying at lunch, they can just mop the floor with you in any game you want to play. Pick a game, and the AI systems will just, they'll beat you, like, badly. So do you think they can, like, turn human beings into money better than humans up to this point have been able to turn each other into money? Yes. And because they're very expensive to run, do you think the people who are paying to make them are going to use them to try to turn humans into money in like extremely new and efficient ways? You bet. In fact, there's no other thing that anybody out there is planning to do with these systems other than turn humans into money. And just doing it old school, we've actually turned out to be pretty good at turning each other into money, haven't we? Like, yeah, even right up to like chattel slavery, frankly. Like, if you just leave us to our own devices, there's about nothing that we won't do to get money out of other humans. It's an unfortunate and slightly unpleasant aspect of how we operate, but that's how we roll. Now we have these new systems that are helping us out that are way smarter and more powerful than we are, and that's pretty intense to contemplate. Next slide. This is what we have to confront. Next slide. What can be done? This is where I'm gonna start to pitch you. Go ahead, next. We have to push back against this. Next. And we have to like figure out what the human use of human attention really is. Next slide. And this is what when I say we, I mean me and increasingly like thousands of folks who identify as attention activists, like in the same spirit as like environmental activism or whatnot. And so I'm gonna give you some of the kind of principles that inform that, and I'm gonna hand out a little stuff. I don't know how far this will last, but this is just kind of some stuff that comes out of that community. So go ahead, next slide. I'm gonna give you the 3 pillars of attention activism as this community called the Friends of Attention a nonprofit community of artists, writers, activists. We have a school in Brooklyn. I talked about this a little bit at lunch. It's a non-for-profit, unaccredited school that just works on these questions, and we are pushing on these matters. Next slide. The 3 pillars of attention activism, as we define them, are 1, go, study. And that's kind of interesting. I have a lot to say about this. We believe that study is itself an attentional form. So we don't just mean studying attention, although we do think that's cool. We think that actually mingling yourself with the stuff of the world, with others, is one of the ways we preserve our humanity in this setting. It's kind of different than research. Research produces product, study produces our persons, which is, I think, kind of important to mention. Study, next. Organizing, we gotta come together. Only way this is gonna work is if we come together. It's gonna take a movement, next. And what we call sanctuary. And we're very interested in this last idea, next slide. Oh yeah, it's like SOS, which is kind of like for branding, you know what I mean? Next, study, quick. What do we do for study? We run this school, next. It's a really cool place. We do classes, we do workshops. Anybody comes to Brooklyn, check it out. We have 1 online class, which is called Attention Activism 101. All of this stuff is supported by a foundation or 2, folks who've helped us out. Go ahead, next. Sanctuary, next. We've done some peer-reviewed scientific literature type stuff on this. This is an article I would recommend to anybody, authored by me and a therapist, a psychotherapist, Eve Mitchell. This is about the way that right now, because the frackers want you all the time, our only hope is to begin to make community agreements as to what we're going to do, where, and when. It's so simple. You're already beginning to do this. Like, you know a coffee shop that won't let you have your laptop, I bet. Right? There's some of those? There are definitely those, right? Okay, that's the beginning of an attention sanctuary. That's people saying, like, no, in this coffee shop, we don't want a bunch of isolated, siloed people just doing this. Some of you are reading about, like, the neo-Luddite movement, student groups that are, like, having parties with no devices. Has anybody been to a no-device party? Anybody tried that? It's kind of an interesting idea. You can literally do it. Like, it's kind of interesting. Just be like, hey, let's have an actual, like, party in which we put our phones in, like, a box. And I am not saying, I am not a boomer. You kids in the back of the room who are like, is this another dude telling me to put my phone away? I'm not that guy. I think the phones are awesome. I think they're so cool. My kid has like 25,000 followers on TikTok. I try to like make social media, and if I get 10,000 people look at something I made, I feel reborn. Then my like 15-year-old comes in and she's like, hey dad, look, I got 2.6 million views. I actually think that's really interesting. I'm in favor of that. I just think it's also really important sometimes to be able to talk to your friend and have your friend not check messages real quick. Who here has had like their kind of feelings hurt at some point where somebody took their phone out where you were talking to them? Come on, let's be real. That happens. Even you dudes, I see you. You didn't get your hands up, but I know it happened, and you felt hurt when that happened. But I'm just saying, we can begin now to be like, this isn't okay. Let's just like, for now, protect each other for a bit. Just this hour. Your classes, you can do this in class. Who's been in a class and like someone is like, you know, looking for the ticket to Cancun, like in the front row, right? And so, and do I say you can't have your devices in class and then someone is like, oh, but like I cramp when I try to hold the pencil. I can't. I have a note from the doctor that I have to use my laptop at all times or else like I have shoulder problems. And I'm like, I read the note. I'm like, okay, Jim, you can have your device in class. I'm fine with that. It can happen. Still though, sometimes we ought to have some part of our classes where we're like, hey everybody, let's actually close the stuff up and like talk for a second and see what happens. This is real. So this idea that we have to get active and work with each other to protect the spaces for forms of human interaction and relation to the world, this is happening because there's a $17 trillion industry that's continuously trying to keep you on your device, and it's working. It's working. You think you want to be on that thing,
And you do, but why do you want to be on that thing? Because, you've been biohacked at scale. Like wanting what we want to want when there's a $17 trillion industry that is literally continuously fracking your brain is pretty difficult, actually. And, I want to be real clear. Like, I might look slightly weird, but I'm not a Marxist, okay? I think that, like, market-based solutions to complex social problems, very valuable. But as we were saying at lunch, for like 40 years, we've been sold the idea of free markets. Who here studies economics? A little bit, right? The whole idea of like the free market is that it increases choice. That price is a way of like rendering choice visible. And that I go into the CVS and I have like 9 different, we were saying this, toothpastes or whatever in different colors. I get to choose them. This is more freedom. The market produces freedom. This is sort of true, has been sort of true. But wait, does human fracking want us to have more freedom? Actually, no. Human fracking is like literally a business model in which you take over the reins of human consciousness and reprogram people to do what you want them to do. That's not capitalism increasing human freedom. That's capitalism meaningfully reducing human freedom. And we need to be like attuned to that, and sanctuaries are the way we protect ourselves. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And then organizing, the last one, next slide. And this is where I'm gonna go even more like, the people at lunch forgave me for this, but like, I'm like gonna be like, would you please buy our book? Next slide, please. And the book is actually really beautiful. It comes out in January. The thing about the book is that it was collectively written by 25 people in this movement. It took us 3 years to write together. All the proceeds of the book support the nonprofit work we're doing, so it's very like kind of wipe away the tears, beautiful, like trying to make the world a better place. Next, collectively authored, next. All proceeds support the nonprofit work, next. And we just got a big grant from the Omidyar Foundation to put the book at the center of a national organizing campaign. So we are literally beginning to train up a cadre of folks organizing communities of attention activism to begin to achieve movement at scale with respect to regulation, shifts in the way school policies are designed, all that kind of stuff. We're doing it. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, I mean, okay, so I put some of this in there just because like, all right, I want you to wind up book, all right. So next, and then this will take you to the book, and next, this is my favorite thing. I really love this. This is our merch, which has human fracking with the big line through it, and yes, I have stickers, which I will give you if you want at the end. So thank you for hearing me out on this. I really appreciate your having given me your attention. And I don't know what time it is, but I think we should have some conversation because I really would love to hear where kind of people are on this stuff.
Thank you, Graham. I was going to give some response, but I actually think the invitation to conversation is better. So why don't we open it up? Me and Sophia have microphones, and if you just want to raise your hand and ask a question, engage in any way, let us know.
Thank you for your presentation. I resonate with so much of what you're arguing. I've been teaching for 23 years on the university level, and just thinking about the difference that I've seen with my first year of teaching versus this year of teaching. My first year, I had to contend with paper airplanes and notes or falling asleep. And this year, I walk into a classroom and I have to contend with Amazon, live football games, and no one talks to anybody. The classroom is dead silent. And I resonate with everything that you're saying. However, I would wonder if you have any suggestions for those of us who are at smaller schools where student ratings make a difference in our job and our promotion. So if we outlaw devices, it might have an impact on our personal career and life. So what do we do with that?
I mean, it's even worse than, tell me your name again.
Catherine.
Catherine, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's even worse than that in a sense. I mean, we did an op-ed for The Nation that's kind of about the way that at present, most of the educational publishing industry and ed tech are working to deploy the very technologies that are being developed to capture attention in the human fracking ecosystem. They're being deployed as scaffolding for educational experiences. So I don't just mean the gamification of like teaching and learning, although that's part of it. I literally mean that the only way to compete for mind time and sensory engagement now is to deploy these techniques. So I honestly don't really, I don't have much to tell you. I mean, this is asymmetrical warfare at the scale of humanity. So if you feel like you have a little problem, you are correct. You are correct. This would be like me finishing the talk and someone being like, you know, I really try so hard to have like a family dinner now and again, but actually I've got my kids pretty good now where I make them not take their phones to the table, but my mother and father come to the table and they use their phones, and then the kids are like, and I can't tell my mom who's 76 not to have her phone out, you know, and you're like, right, like this is a real problem. This is like enemy action. And I want to keep saying, I'm not a Luddite. I think the technologies are amazing. My partner's a filmmaker. Her films are all about like uploading of consciousness and stuff like that. I became a historian of science because I think science and technology is so cool. The problem is not the technology. Just like I think steam engines are awesome too. And I don't, like, it's not like, right? The problem's not steam engines. The problem's not the technology. Problem is greed. Not complicated. Not complicated, comma, team, exclamation point. Problem is not complicated. The problem is greed. And greed kills. Actually, I live in New York City. I live up at the top of Harlem. I go to a gym that's pretty gritty on 155th Street. And there was a guy in the gym lifting the other day who just had a shirt that said, greed kills. And I was like, respect. You know what I mean? It's like, that pretty much sums it up. Greed kills. So I don't have an easy answer. I do believe, this is going to sound so corny. It's like, I almost want to tell you to turn the camera off over there because I'm so embarrassed to put this on tape, but let's just say it. I literally believe in humanity. I believe in humanity. By which I mean to say, I think it's possible to remind people that it feels good to be human in relation to other humans and the world and themselves. So literally, our best hope in all this is not to scold people, but simply to invite them to the goodness that is possible. So if you all in the back there, like, experiment with having a party on, like, you know, Friday night, what's today? Thursday? Tomorrow night? Have a little party, try it. And just for an experiment, do 1 hour where everybody like leaves their phones somewhere else and just see what it feels like. And if it feels kind of good, then cool, go with it. Like, I believe that there's goodness to be had in rediscovering the way and probably people are already doing this, I want to be clear. The kids actually have habits. It's the parents that mostly don't have the habits. Can we say that? Like, the kids don't take their phones out all the time in each other's faces, anything like the adults do. So it'd be really good if the adults stopped like lecturing the kids about their own problems in a way. But I just want to say that your best hope as a teacher in a situation like that, read our like Attention Sanctuary article. And what we say is, let's have an actual conversation. I do this with my students at Princeton now. Every class I begin with a sort of, why are we here? Like, I had to drive down from New York City to Princeton. It took me 2 hours to be in this seminar room with the 28 of you. You all could have stayed in bed. I could have stayed in bed. We could have done this on Zoom. I'll do you one better. We could have recorded my lectures 2 years ago, and I could not be doing this at all. You all could just be watching my lecture on 3x speed in the shower, and I could be doing something I enjoy. Why are we coming together like this in this room? And furthermore, let's do a little moment of equity for a second. In my rooms at Princeton, rooms here, what's the SAT average here or something? It's like 1580 or something. Like, how many people want to be in that room that you're in and didn't get in? Like 6 people for every person in the room. 8 people for every person in the room couldn't be there. They wanted to be, but they're not. Well, why don't we just let them be there? It's like you just put the whole thing online, right? I mean, there's no reason for us not to let them come. But if we're not going to let them come, and your parents are going to have spent almost $1 million getting you to this point educationally, and the society's going to invest vast sums of money in making it possible for you to have this little curated, bespoke experience that we're not going to let everyone else have, even though we could, what makes this so special? Closing the door and being 20 of us in this seminar. It had better be good, y'all, because the cost is denominated in the multiple millions of dollars are being in this room 12 times this semester for 2 hours and 50 minutes. And I just do this conversation with them. And what we try to arrive at is an answer to that. And if you work it, there are different answers that are possible, but at least one of them is some shit has to happen with us in this room that's going to be kind of so special as we hear each other and talk. It's not me talking to you. It's got to be something that's going to happen in this room while we're together. I don't know if we can get there, but let's see. And what should we do to kind of optimize the odds of our having a certain kind of improvisational jazz ecstasy of thought sometime this semester together, so you never forget it? Probably a thing we could experiment with is closing up our devices and actually listening to each other. I'm not going to make you do it because, frankly, I get paid. I get paid whether you all are, looking for tickets to Cancun or not. What do you want to do? It's about, in a sense, having people feel invited to step into something that feels good in their beings. And I believe, it could be quixotic, ever pertaining to Quixote, the guy who tilts with the windmills or whatnot. So it could be crazy, but I just believe. I believe that given the opportunity to feel good and the promise that if they make some decisions with you, something good could happen, I believe. But it's not straightforward. Thank you, Catherine.
More questions?
Thoughts? Yes. Oh. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I love that last bit that you were, as you were describing what was happening in your classes. We're designing a master's program at the college where we are now, and we're trying to figure out the delivery formats. So on the one hand, it could be completely in person. On the other hand, asynchronous online, some kind of hybrid of the two in the middle. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your thoughts about college courses being offered for degree credits online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Friends of Attention community, which you can read about, there was a kind of a profile on the emergence of the community in the New Yorker some years back. I guess it was last year. It came actually out of the Sao Paulo biennial, so a lot of people in the group initially were kind of artists, so it was an artist biennial. But we really kind of came together as an international coalition when the pandemic started. And I was saying this to somebody, we were very early adopters of Google Meet before Zoom. Remember? Some of you will remember. There was no Zoom, there was no Zoom. And we were all using whatever we could find to reach each other in those first months in 2020 when suddenly we were all cut off from each other. And so we started meeting together online, 40 or 50 of us every week on Google Meet, and thinking about the way our experience of attention was changing as we were cut off from normal life. And that kind of got things going. So I'm, again, quite sympathetic to the power of online experiences that are synchronous. And the Friends of Attention still meet online every month. We have a set of rules for our online gatherings. It's cameras on. They're short. They are highly they're almost more like a radio show in terms of how tightly produced they are. There's never like, oh, like Harry, your mic's not on. Never. We don't do that. It's like bam, bam, bam. It's breakout rooms, because breakout rooms are incredible. It's like turn and talk, but it's super efficient. It's way better than turn and talk in a class. So everybody has to get good at using these tools, remixing the groups. We begin with a set of short breakout rooms so people can say hi to each other. We end into breakout rooms so people can keep talking when the meetings are over. It's a bunch of specific kind of things you got to do to make synchronous online stuff work. And asynchronous stuff online, I'm a little less connected to, although I admire ASU. I'm actually going out to ASU. ASU has fallen in love with what we're doing. Arizona State University, enormous, huge online educational system. I believe in their kind of mission in a lot of ways. We do an online course called Attention Activism 101. As I said, it's the only online class that the Strother School does. Strother School is named after a former student of mine who's one of the drafters of the 12 Theses on Attention, part of the group that wrote the book. He was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 32, worked with us right up to the end, died at the age of 35, and we created the school in his honor after he passed. We actually have this one online class, which ASU is trying to think about turning into one of their like massive MOOCs, because they're so interested in the way the thing works. So I believe there's a lot that can be done to move educationally into these spaces. But I'll say this quickly, and I said it at lunch. I actually think this is like a moment like of radical transformation in education. I think that like what we really need are thousands of new schools that are like thinking differently about the work of teaching and learning, and more focused on like the making of persons and how to live and what to do. Because I think basically colleges and universities now really have to train people to get jobs. And that makes it very hard, even at a like magnificent Catholic institution informed by the Catholic tradition, like this one, it's hard to hold space for like soul work in that setting. So I increasingly think that little startup crazy schools like mine are the places where soul work is going to happen, and more colleges and universities, you'll do soul work like out on the field. It's like athletics, good for soul work, activities, sorority, fraternity, that's like soul work spaces, working with others. School is more about like kind of certain kinds of certification for professionalism. I lament this. I don't see ways exactly to fix it, although I've been moved to like spend some time with the formative education crew who are like speaking to the question of the education of the whole person. And I think of that as like beautiful work, and you know, may they succeed, but the forces of empire are like against us in this regard. We have time for a couple more, and then if you can believe it, Matthew has to rush me to the airport or I'll miss the last plane back home.
Thank you, Professor. I want to kind of like answer what you said about the devices in class, and I think our Professor Clemente over here is doing an amazing job every time. Like sort of like an incentive, we go in class, he takes our phone away. Well, it's an option. He tells us that we can leave it there and write our name to see if we have our cell phone, and as an extra credit, most of us, I think, leave the phone. So that could be sort of like a beginning, like a trial, I don't know. And also, I believe that education starts at home. And what I do is I try to practice what he says too, about taking the phone away at the dinner table. You know, let's have a conversation. How was your day at school? You know, everything. My wife over here supports that very much. And every time we sit at the table, it's to gather around, enjoy the meal, and see how the day was for everybody. My kids ask me how my day went. They ask Berta how her day went, and so on and so forth. So I think if we try to implement that rule at home, it can start building up. Now, my children go to Chelsea Public Schools, and they, in the beginning of the first period, the teachers take away the phone, and they don't get it at the end until the end of the day. So I think that's it's amazing what you're trying to do. You know, keep ourselves focused where it actually is important.
Amen. I mean, I don't have a response except it's going to take all of us taking this stuff seriously and not just doing it in a kind of again, not in a scolding way, but in a kind of like, there's an actual enemy that is seeking to liquidate the goodness of human consciousness in order to enrich a small number of tech barons. So let's see what we can do here, friends. Let's maybe take a couple more if there are some.
Hi, I'm Colleen. I actually work in the field, like what you're talking about, in the co-curricular space, and I'm doing the PhD in formative ed, and so I know there's a lot of students in here, too, that are undergraduates, so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more. I know we've talked about the classroom, like a lot, and I think some of the sanctuary space that you talk about, and even some of the soul work that you're talking about, happens in the corridors, right? Like in between rooms in the residence halls, when you're walking to and from class, maybe at the event that you go to after hours, or whatever you all can imagine the youths do now. But I'm curious if you could give some of the folks in the room that maybe are still experiencing undergraduate college right now, how they can take steps towards attention activism that might feel just like heart work and not hard work.
Yeah, beautiful. So I guess what I would say there is that the best part of attention activism is that you're already doing it. Whatever you do that makes you feel good with yourself and others, especially if it's like not giving access to the frackers, you're there. So I don't know what that is. Maybe it's throwing the football around. Like literally it could be that. Maybe it's like taking your dog for a walk. Maybe it is like reading a book. Reading turns out to have been an attentional practice. It's like, as it's disappearing, we like suddenly notice that. I don't know what it is you do, what your hobby is, rock climbing, whatever it is. You definitely already have something where you're out of reach of the frackers that you do with other people. It's just that now you need to like protect that and take care of it. Because as we were kind of joking about at lunch, if there's anything you do with a few other people that you like, there is right now a dude leaving business school with a PowerPoint deck in which he's doing presentations to venture capitalists saying, there are people who like to rock climb. And my proposal is that we're going to get them all onto this new platform. And once we have all the rock climbers in America on this platform, we will have an extraordinary way to gain access to the rapidly growing market in rock climbing gear and paraphernalia and clothing and the clubs, and we'll sell tours through it. This is literally how platform capitalism got going. The first and biggest of these platforms was Facebook. Everybody already had Facebooks. They were looking at each other to see who was like hot and not on campus. And a bright college leader was like, we should get all those people on a platform. And then we can like sell them advertisements. And then there was like Pinterest, which was literally a bunch of ladies who like to exchange, what's that called when you like knit and you have like a pattern or whatever? Yeah, crochet and knitting patterns. So all these people who knitted, and there was some like bright dude leaving business schools like, we'll get all the people who like to knit and exchange patterns on a platform. They can exchange their patterns, and once we have completely saturated the textile craft market, we'll frack the hell out of them. And like, that's called the modern economy. And so whatever it is you like to do with 5 of your friends, there's somebody who's trying to get you on a platform so that they can frack you. And the only way they will be unsuccessful is if you like are like, actually, this is the thing I'm doing to take care of my attention. And I want to say, I don't know if I made this clear enough, the whole point here is that our attention is not that narrow tracking and triggering thing that you're all worried about. You know, when you're like worried about your attention span. Don't worry about that. We don't want a screen time app that gives us another 7 minutes at the end of the day that we can apply to some other stupid screen-based task instead of the other stupid screen-based tasks. No. We want to remember that our attention is daydreaming, talking to a friend, playing pick-up wiffle ball. Our attention is what constitutes our experience of life. It is interest, care, love, friendship. That's what makes our life. And it is our attention, most broadly conceived. So we need a kind of rewilding of our attention to remember all the things that are truly attentional and stop fretting about this psychotic, mechanomorphic, tap and click tracker kind of attention, because we actually need to be able to retain our humanity, not by ensuring that we have a little more of that, but by remembering that that is actually a very specific thing developed at a specific historical moment. I mean, in the book, we make, I think, a cool point, which is that, like, literally, right now, there's a thing called the Connor test for ADHD. Some of you may be familiar with this test. The Connor test is kind of a game of digital whack-a-mole, a little bit. It comes richly out of the tradition I've just invoked. And I just want you to imagine for a moment trying to explain to a Yanomami shaman in Roraima, plateau mountain at the kind of intersection of Brazil, Venezuela, and Guyana, that we're currently diagnosing and medicating a quarter of a demographic slice of our youth population because they have substandard performance on digital whack-a-mole. You could sort of see the guy being like, huh, what is that testing exactly? It's not super relevant here in the Amazonian rainforest, your ability to stay with digital whack-a-mole for a long period of time. That we don't really have that. It's not important. It's weird that that's a key index. Now, of course, now that Yanomami shaman is probably continuously playing Halo or whatever. But so take it back 10 years ago, before they got broadband. But I want to remind you of the kind of contingency of that understanding of our attention, which is not to say ADHD is not a thing. I would not say that. I would just say I'm a historian of science. There's history here. There's historical specificity. I think we might have time for
one more. We have time for one more question.
We're the humans. We'd love to get a student in here. Have we heard from a student yet, though?
We have heard from one student, but is there another?
I even want an undergraduate.
Potentially one of my students.
Where's an undergraduate? I want to hear from an undergraduate. I want pushback. I want an undergraduate to be like, no.
Tucker, you got a question?
Oh, cold called. Tucker, that sucks, man. I'm really sorry.
Going? All right,
Go.
great. Oh, Tucker, nice.
Oh.
So what would you recommend steps of action to fix this problem?
There you go. What would you recommend as steps to fix this problem? I would say basically, this is a problem. I'm going to give an answer that I think is going to make Professor Clemente happy. I'm going to sideline for a moment on the idea of critical theory. What's a critical theory? A critical theory is this very interesting category that philosopher types like him really groove on. They believe that there are certain descriptions of the world that are empirical, that are also emancipatory. Meaning, there are certain truths that can literally make you free. There are a couple of great examples of these. Actually, Karl Marx is probably the greatest. Marx had a theory. He was like, once you understand the wage labor theory of capital, you will understand that that commodity you're longing for is the product of human labor. And what you long for in that is what you already have, the capacity to do and make things. So you don't have to sit there and look in the window and be like, I sure wish I could have that. You could just decide with your peeps you were going to make the things you want, cut out the middleman, and it's all yours, baby. You could have whatever you wanted because money is simply congealed human labor, and your labor you have. And so this was emancipatory. You're like, oh, I see what money is. Money is like my own hands. It's not something beyond me. It's what I've got. This is the kind of like core revelatory insight of Marxism. Freud is another critical theory. Once you understand that your motivations are being driven by deeper psychic phenomena, you are freed from the compulsions and cycles and manias and obsessions that had previously driven you because you didn't understand yourself. So my answer to this is, like, the concrete step is to see through the staggering lie behind which authentic evil is being done to humanity. It's literally to like unveil the truth and to realize that when your friend is like down in this instead of like communicating with you, that's not him or her kind of like missing the moment to be with you. That is literally dark forces hacking humanity. And as we awaken to that, it doesn't mean we can't still use our phones, which, as I say, are amazing. It just means we have to know what's going on so that we are awakened to be aware so that they don't get us. I would say it's not to like turn it into a kind of Manichaean battle of dark and light, but I think it operates at that scale. And we get the world we make. That's so intense. And we make our world with our attention. That to which we give our time and mind and senses, that's what grows, and that's what gives back to us. And so what's happening here with people commodifying that is commodifying the very stuff out of which we make the worlds we want to live in. So it sounds kind of abstract, and if you want, I mean, the other thing you can do is you can low-key write me an email, and you can take the Attention Activism 101 course for free, just you guys and you ladies, the undergraduates here, and see what you think of how we think about this stuff. Because I think this institution should have an attention activism club, a community of people who are taking this kind of stuff seriously. And those of you who want to make money, I'm cool with that too. This movement I'm describing, there's going to be bank to be made in this. In 1962, did anybody go running or go to the gym after work? No. Why? Because there were no gyms to go to after work, except like Gold's Gym for powerlifters, and there were like 16 of those. And did anybody go running? No, because Nike didn't exist and there was no such thing as a running shoe team. There was no running shoes in 1962. Do you hear what I'm saying? The whole world of like the forms of athletic wellness that you all know is like familiar happened in the last 50 years, and huge fortunes were made. That idea of health and wellness in our bodies was basically born in the early 1970s. Look it up, a book called Running by James F. Fix. And that's what's happening now. People are going to take care of their attention over the next 20 years. They're going to look back and be like, you people didn't like take care of your attention and like nurture it and protect it from getting like flabby and compromised? That's so weird. Your kids are going to say that to you. You're like, were you really there back when we just gave phones to like 6-year-olds and like, we're like, let's see what happens. And then like people were hugely damaged? That's so weird. The way we look back at our grandparents and we're like, were you really there when like doctors like went on television to be like, be sure you smoke Cools because mentholated cigarettes are excellent for your respiration. And that was real. That was like what happened. And we look back and we're like, how come the doctors were recommending methylated cigarettes? The change that's coming is at that scale. And so there are fortunes to be made in taking care of our attention. And that's a place you guys could put some time. Think about this as business opportunities too. Get me to the airport.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you for being here tonight. Big thanks to a couple of people who helped make this possible. Sophia Rietti has been a huge help, as always, with all of this. We have a couple of co-sponsors. Department of Formative Education has been a great help to us, as always. And hopefully we'll see you again at another Psychological Humanities lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, especially for the invitation. And listen, on that QR code, if you don't mind, pre-order the book. I'd really appreciate it. Help us out. Thank you.